Something just happened at the highest level of the American legal system, and it didn't come with weeks of buildup or slow debate. It came fast, quiet, and with consequences that could spread across the entire country. On May 3rd, the Supreme Court issued an emergency ruling, not a routine decision, not a standard case that moved slowly through months of arguments. This was different. This was urgent. And the vote? 6-3. That split alone is enough to raise eyebrows, because it tells you right away, this was not unanimous. This was not simple. This was a deeply contested decision with serious implications. But here's what makes this even more intense. It wasn't just what the court decided. It was how quickly they decided it, and why. Emergency rulings from the Supreme Court are rare. They don't follow the usual path. There's no long wait for final opinions after months of hearings. Instead, these decisions come through what's often called the shadow docket. And when something lands on that docket, it means one thing. Someone argued that waiting could cause immediate harm. That time itself was part of the problem. So the court steps in, fast. That's exactly what happened here. Behind the scenes, legal teams rushed filings to the court. They asked for immediate action. They argued that if the justices didn't intervene right away, something serious could happen, something that couldn't easily be undone, and the court agreed to hear it. Then, just as quickly, they ruled. Now, at first glance, the ruling might seem technical. It doesn't come with a long, detailed explanation like some major cases. But if you look closer, you start to see the real impact. Because this decision isn't just about one issue. It's about power. Who has it? Who can use it? And where the limits are. At the center of this case is a legal conflict that has been building for years. A tension between federal authority and individual rights. Between what the government can enforce and what the Constitution protects. That tension finally reached a breaking point. And when it did, it went straight to the Supreme Court. The emergency request focused on a lower court ruling, a decision that had already started to change how a certain law was being applied. Supporters of that lower court ruling said it was necessary, that it corrected an overreach. Opponents said the opposite. They warned that the ruling could disrupt enforcement across the country, that it could create confusion, that it could open the door to serious consequences if it stayed in place. So they asked the Supreme Court to step in immediately, not later, not after months of review, right now. And the court responded. With a 6-3 vote, the justices issued an order that changed the situation overnight. But here's where things get complicated. The ruling didn't fully resolve the case. Instead, it paused something, or allowed something to continue, depending on how you look at it. And that distinction matters. Because emergency rulings often don't answer the final question. They control what happens while the case continues. They set the stage. They decide what rules apply, for now. And sometimes, those temporary decisions have long-lasting effects. That's what people are trying to understand right now. What exactly did the court allow? What did it block? And what does that mean moving forward? Legal analysts are digging into every word of the order, every line, every signal. Because even a short ruling can carry deep meaning, especially when it comes from the highest court in the country. Some experts say the majority's decision suggests a clear direction, that when the full case is eventually heard, the court may lean the same way. Others are more cautious. They point out that emergency rulings don't always predict final outcomes, but even they admit, this one feels significant. And then there's the dissent, the 3 justices who disagreed. Their response is just as important as the majority's order, because dissents often reveal the concerns that didn't win, but didn't disappear either. They raise warnings, they highlight risks, and sometimes they become the foundation for future arguments. In this case, the dissenting justices expressed concern about the speed of the decision, about the impact it could have, and about whether the court should have acted so quickly in such a complex situation. That disagreement adds another layer to the story, because it shows that even at the highest level, there is no simple consensus. There is debate, there is tension, and there are different visions of how the law should be applied. Now, outside the courtroom, reactions are coming in fast. Officials, legal scholars, and advocacy groups are all responding. Some are calling the ruling necessary. They say it prevents immediate harm and keeps the legal system stable. Others are calling it dangerous. They argue it changes the balance too quickly without full review. And in between those views, millions of people are trying to figure out what this means for them. Because this isn't just a legal theory, this is real. It affects real policies, real enforcement, and, potentially, real lives. One of the biggest concerns right now is uncertainty, because emergency rulings don't always come with detailed instructions. They don't always explain every scenario. Instead, they create a framework that others must interpret. Lower courts, government agencies, law enforcement, all of them now have to decide how to apply this decision in real situations. And when interpretation varies, confusion can follow. That's why this ruling is being described as a shockwave, not because it ends a debate, but because it changes the landscape all at once. Think of it like a sudden shift in the ground beneath a system that was already under pressure. Everything built on that system has to adjust. Some parts will hold, others may crack, and new questions will emerge. Already, legal challenges are being prepared. Attorneys are reviewing the ruling to see how it can be used in other cases. They are asking, does this decision open the door to new arguments? Does it strengthen certain claims? Does it weaken others? And the answer, in many cases, is yes. Because Supreme Court rulings don't stay isolated. They ripple outward. They influence cases far beyond the one they directly address. That's especially true with emergency decisions, because they often deal with urgent, high-stakes issues, and those issues rarely exist in a vacuum. They connect to broader questions, bigger debates, long-standing conflicts. Now, another key part of this story is timing. Why now? Why did this issue reach the court at this exact moment? The answer lies in how quickly things were changing at the lower court level. A decision had already started to take effect, and that created a sense of urgency. Supporters of the emergency request argued that if the Supreme Court didn't act immediately, the consequences would spread, that it would become harder to reverse the situation later. That immediate intervention was necessary to prevent disruption, and that argument clearly resonated with the majority of justices. But again, not all of them. The dissent suggests that at least 3 justices believed the situation did not require such rapid action, that the normal process should have been followed, that more time should have been taken. That disagreement reflects a deeper issue within the court itself: how to balance urgency with caution, how to respond to fast-moving legal challenges without overstepping, and how to maintain stability while still addressing potential harm. There is no easy answer to those questions, and this case brings them into sharp focus. For now, what we know is this: the Supreme Court has acted. The vote was 6-3. The decision came quickly, and its effects are already being felt. But what we don't fully know yet is where this leads, because this is not the final chapter. This is the beginning of a new phase. The full case will still move forward, arguments will still be made, and eventually, the court may issue a final, detailed ruling. When that happens, it could confirm this direction, or it could change it. But until then, this emergency decision will shape what happens next. And that means its impact is immediate, not theoretical, not distant. Right now, across the country, in courtrooms, in policy discussions, and in everyday conversations about the law, people are paying attention because they can feel that something has shifted, even if they don't yet know exactly how. And that feeling, that sense of change, is what makes this moment so important, because moments like this don't come often. A sudden decision, a divided court, an urgent issue, and a ripple effect that could reach far beyond the original case. As more details come out, the picture will become clearer. But for now, one thing is certain: this ruling matters, and what happens next could matter even more. And now, as the immediate reaction begins to settle, a new phase is starting to take shape. And this is where the real impact begins to unfold. Because emergency rulings don't just pause a situation. They redirect it. They change who has the advantage. They shift the legal ground under everyone involved. And right now, courts across the country are adjusting to that shift in real time. Judges who were relying on earlier decisions are now being forced to reconsider. Cases that seemed stable just days ago are suddenly uncertain again. Attorneys are filing new motions, pointing directly to this 6-3 ruling as a reason to revisit outcomes that once looked settled. That's how powerful a Supreme Court intervention can be. Even without a full opinion, even without months of explanation, a single order can reset the direction of dozens of legal battles at once. And that's exactly what is happening here. In federal courts, legal teams are moving fast. Some are trying to expand the reach of this ruling, arguing that its logic applies to other cases. Others are trying to limit it, saying it should only apply to this specific situation and nothing more. And somewhere in the middle, judges are trying to decide how far this decision actually goes. Because that's one of the biggest challenges with emergency rulings. They are strong, but they are often narrow. They carry authority, but sometimes leave room for interpretation. And when that happens, different courts can move in different directions. One court might read the ruling broadly, applying it to multiple cases. Another might read it narrowly, keeping its impact contained. That creates something that the legal system always tries to avoid: inconsistency. But in moments like this, some inconsistency is almost unavoidable, because clarity takes time. And right now, time is exactly what this ruling was meant to address. But there's another layer to this story that is just as important, and maybe even more significant in the long run. What this ruling signals about the Supreme Court itself. Because decisions like this don't just resolve disputes. They send messages about how the court sees its role, messages about how it views urgency, and messages about how it balances competing interests. In this case, the message from the majority appears clear. When they believe immediate action is necessary, they are willing to act, even quickly, even without waiting for the full process to play out. That approach has supporters, people who believe the court should step in when time-sensitive issues arise, who argue that waiting too long can cause real harm, that sometimes speed is not just helpful, it's essential. But that approach also has critics, people who worry that acting too quickly can lead to incomplete decisions, who believe that complex issues deserve full hearings, full arguments, and detailed opinions before major changes are made. And that concern was reflected in the dissent. Those 3 justices didn't just disagree with the outcome, they raised deeper questions about process, about timing, and about the role of the court in emergency situations. Because once the court sets a pattern, it can continue. If emergency rulings become more common, the balance of how decisions are made could begin to shift. And that's something legal scholars are already discussing. Is the shadow docket becoming more influential? Are major decisions increasingly being made through emergency orders rather than full opinions? And if so, what does that mean for transparency, for consistency, for public trust? These are not small questions, and they don't have simple answers. But this ruling has brought them back into focus. At the same time, lawmakers in Washington are paying close attention, because when the Supreme Court acts, it can change the pressure on Congress. If a ruling creates uncertainty, lawmakers may feel pushed to respond, to clarify, to define, to step in where the court has left questions open. But that's easier said than done, because Congress moves slowly, debates are long, agreements are difficult, and on issues that are already deeply divided, action is never guaranteed. So there is a real possibility that this situation remains unresolved for some time, with courts interpreting, agencies adjusting, and lawmakers watching, waiting to see how things develop before making a move. Meanwhile, government agencies are in a position where they must respond carefully. They can't ignore the ruling, but they also can't assume too much. They need to analyze what the court said and what it didn't say. They need to determine how their policies are affected, what needs to change, what can stay the same, and how to communicate those changes clearly, because confusion at that level can quickly spread. And when it comes to enforcement, clarity is critical. For law enforcement officers, this creates a different kind of challenge. They rely on clear guidelines, clear rules, clear authority, and when those things are shifting, even slightly, it can affect how they operate, what actions they take, what decisions they make in the moment. That's why training updates often follow major rulings, because even a small change in interpretation can have a big impact in real-world situations. Now, for the public, the most important question remains the same. What does this mean going forward? And the answer, at least for now, is still developing. Because we are in the middle of the process, not at the end. This emergency ruling sets the tone, but the full case is still ahead. Arguments will be made, evidence will be reviewed, and eventually, the Supreme Court may issue a final decision that goes much deeper. That decision could confirm what we are seeing now, or it could take a different direction. But until that happens, this ruling is shaping the present. And that makes it incredibly important, because the present is where policies are applied, where decisions are made, where actions are taken, and when the legal foundation shifts, even slightly, everything built on it has to adjust. Another key point to watch is how this ruling influences future emergency requests, because now, attorneys know that the court is willing to act quickly in certain situations. That knowledge alone could lead to more emergency filings, more urgent appeals, more requests for immediate intervention, and that could change how cases move through the system, faster in some situations, more complex in others, because urgency adds pressure, and pressure can shape outcomes. At the same time, the court itself may become more selective, choosing carefully when to act quickly and when to wait, trying to maintain a balance between responsiveness and restraint. That balance will be critical, because the authority of the court depends not just on its decisions, but on how those decisions are made. Now, looking ahead, there are several possible paths this situation could take. One path is clarity. Lower courts align in their interpretations. Agencies adjust smoothly. And the legal system stabilizes around this ruling until the final decision arrives. Another path is conflict. Different courts issue different rulings. Confusion increases, and more cases rush toward the Supreme Court for resolution. A third path is legislative action. Congress steps in and creates clear rules that remove the uncertainty. But again, that path depends on political will, and that's never guaranteed. Each of these paths leads to a different outcome, a different future, and right now, all of them are possible. That's what makes this moment so important. Because we are not just watching a decision, we are watching a turning point, a point where multiple directions open at once, and the path that is chosen will shape what comes next. For now, the only certainty is change. The legal landscape has shifted, the conversation has intensified, and the stakes have increased. People are paying attention, because they understand that something significant has happened, even if the full impact is not yet clear. And in situations like this, awareness matters. Understanding the process matters. Because this is how the law evolves, not all at once, but step by step, decision by decision, moment by moment. And this moment is one of those steps, one of those decisions, one of those shifts that sets everything else in motion. As the days go on, more details will emerge, more interpretations will be shared, and slowly, the picture will become clearer. But right now, we are still in that early stage, where questions outnumber answers, where analysis is still unfolding, and where the future is still being shaped. What started as an emergency request has now become something much bigger, a national conversation, a legal crossroads, and a reminder of just how powerful a single Supreme Court decision can be. Because in the end, it's not just about the ruling itself, it's about what it leads to, and that story is still being written.